The champagne tower was halfway poured when Shania saw him standing in the doorway. Baek Sunjin looked exactly as he had 2 months ago in Seoul. Dark suit cut to precision, shoulders back, that unreadable expression that made her chest tighten in ways she'd spent 8 weeks trying to forget. The only difference was the manila envelope in his hand, and the fact that her mother was already moving toward him with the kind of smile that preceded security calls. Michael's hand rested on Shania's lower back, proprietary, the way it always was at her mother's events. "Someone you know?" She should have said yes, should have headed this off before it became a scene. But panic made her stupid, and the lie came out smooth. "I don't think so." Sunjin crossed the ballroom like he owned it, like the 60 guests in cocktail attire and the string quartet in the corner didn't exist. Like the engagement banner hanging behind the champagne tower was a minor inconvenience rather than the entire point of the evening. When he stopped in front of their table, he looked only at Shania. "Miss Wellington." His voice was quiet, controlled. The same voice he'd used in a hotel room with blackout curtains when he'd asked her to stay just one more night. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." She kept her tone light, professional. The same voice she used in depositions when opposing counsel tried to rattle her. "This is a private event." "Then we should discuss private matters." He set the envelope on the white tablecloth between her champagne flute and the crystal vase of peonies. "Unless you'd prefer I do this publicly." Michael stood slowly. He was taller than Sunjin by an inch, broader in the shoulders, but somehow the geometry didn't matter. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Sunjin still didn't look at him. "Shania, please." The please did something to her. She remembered that word, remembered it whispered against her collarbone at 3 in the morning, remembered the way he said it, like he'd never had to ask for anything in his life and wasn't entirely sure how. Michael's voice dropped. "Shania, what's going on?" She looked up at her fiancé, the man her mother had selected, the man who checked every box on the list of appropriate partners, and saw confusion starting to sharpen into suspicion. She had maybe 30 seconds before this became a disaster in front of everyone who mattered. "5 minutes, she said quietly. "Please, just let me handle this." Michael's jaw tightened. 5 minutes. She stood, smoothing the silk of her engagement dress, and walked toward the terrace doors without looking back. She knew Sunjin would follow. He always did. Outside, October air bit through the thin fabric. She crossed her arms and turned to face him, putting the stone railing between them like it could protect her from whatever came next. "You had no right to come here. You had no right to disappear." He set the envelope on the railing between them. 3 weeks, then nothing. It was always going to be nothing, Sunjin. We both knew that. Did we? He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that she'd tried for 2 months to forget. "Because I don't remember agreeing to that." "We didn't need to agree. I live in Atlanta. You live in Seoul. I had responsibilities to get back to." "Responsibilities?" His voice went flat. "Is that what you call him?" "Michael is my fiancé. Michael is your mother's selection. Don't pretend otherwise." The accuracy of it stung more than it should have. "You don't know anything about my life. I know you were in my bed 8 weeks ago. I know you weren't wearing that ring." He gestured to the diamond on her left hand. "I know you didn't mention him once. Because it wasn't relevant. Wasn't it?" He moved closer, and she held her ground even though every instinct told her to step back. "Or were you already planning to come home and play the dutiful daughter?" Don't what? Tell the truth." His control was slipping now. She could hear it in the edges of his voice. "You spent 3 weeks with me. You let me." He stopped, started over. "And then you got on a plane and went back to pretending I didn't exist. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is finding out from my security team that you're getting married. What's not fair is having to dig through reports to understand why you really left. Her stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, he picked up the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He didn't hand it to her, just held it where she could see. The ultrasound image was grainy, black and white, 7 weeks, 2 days. Patient name, Wellington, Shania M. She stopped breathing. How did you? My head of security monitors potential threats. Your name got flagged. Medical appointments, pharmacy visits. He set the paper down on the railing with careful precision. I didn't ask him to investigate, but once he told me, I couldn't ignore it. So you had it confirmed. I had it verified. The timeline matches Sol, not him. He gestured toward the ballroom where Michael was probably watching through the glass. You've been careful with your fiancé. Very careful. She forced herself to breathe, to think, to find some way to regain control of a situation that was spiraling faster than she could manage. You have no right. I have every right. He stepped closer, and this time she did step back. Her spine hit the railing. That's my child, Shania. Don't call it that. What should I call it? A complication, a situation, anything but... She stopped, pressing her hands against her face. You shouldn't be here. Where should I be? In Seoul, pretending you didn't walk away carrying my child, waiting for you to marry another man and raise it as his. I wasn't going to... Weren't you? His voice went deadly quiet. Then why doesn't he know? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Does your fiancé know you're pregnant, Shania? That's none of your business. Everything about this is my business. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You don't get to make this decision alone. It's my body. Our child. The possessiveness in his voice should have made her angry. Instead, it made something in her chest crack open. Why are you here? The question came out smaller than she intended. Really? Why did you come? He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, not softer, but more honest. Because you were going to marry him without telling me I had a child. The bluntness of it hit harder than anger would have. The terrace door opened. Michael stepped out and his expression was no longer confused. It was cold, certain. Shania, inside, now. She looked between them. Sun Jin with his impossible demands, and Michael with his legitimate claim to her presence, and felt the last of her carefully constructed life start to crumble. I need a minute. You've had 5. Michael's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. Your mother is asking questions. My parents are asking questions, and I'd like some answers before I have to give them any. Sun Jin picked up the ultrasound and held it out to her. Keep it, or throw it away. But you can't pretend it doesn't exist. He stepped back, creating distance that somehow felt worse than proximity. And neither can I. He walked past Michael toward the garden stairs, the exit that would let him disappear without walking back through the ballroom. Michael watched him go. Then he turned to Shania, and she saw the exact moment he understood. Not the details, not the specifics, but enough. How long? Michael, how long? She looked down at the ultrasound in her hand, at the grainy image that represented every choice she'd made and every consequence she'd tried to avoid. 2 months. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected it, like some part of him had known all along. Get your things, we're leaving. We can't just watch me. He walked back inside, leaving her alone on the terrace with an ultrasound she couldn't hide, and a truth she could no longer avoid. Inside, the string quartet played something light and celebratory. Someone laughed. Her mother's voice rose above the music, warm and pleased, telling a story about Shania as a child. Shania folded the ultrasound once, twice, and slipped it into her clutch. Then she went back inside to the engagement party that would never become a wedding, and tried to figure out how to survive the next 5 minutes without her entire life falling apart. Hi fam, enjoying the story? You're welcome to subscribe for more. Thanks for listening. Michael didn't speak until they were in his car. He'd handled the exit with surgical precision, found her mother, made apologies about Shania feeling unwell, accepted concern with the appropriate amount of gratitude, and guided her out through the side entrance before anyone could ask too many questions. Now they sat in his Tesla in her parents' driveway, engine running, neither of them moving. "Soul," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "The 3-week contract negotiation." "Yes." He nodded slowly, hands resting on the steering wheel at perfect 10 and 2. "And I proposed 3 days after you got back." "Michael, I'm not asking for an explanation yet." His voice was eerily calm. "I'm just establishing facts." She pressed her hands together in her lap. "I found out about the pregnancy 2 weeks after that, after we were already engaged. So the timeline is soul, engagement, pregnancy discovery." "Yes." "And at no point did you think to tell me it wasn't a question either." They sat in silence for a long moment. Through the window, she could see lights still on in the ballroom. The party was continuing without them. Her mother was probably making excuses, spinning the narrative into something manageable. "Who is he?" Michael asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters to my parents. It'll matter to your mother. So, yes, it matters." The practicality of his response shouldn't have stung, but it did. Baek Sunjin, he runs his family's business in Seoul. Michael's eyebrows went up slightly. "The Baek family. You know them. Everyone in international business knows of them." He was quiet for a moment. "This is going to be a nightmare to manage." "Manage?" "The optics, Shania. My family, your mother, the firm." He tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. "Do you have any idea what this is going to look like?" "I wasn't thinking about optics." "Clearly," his voice went sharp. "You weren't thinking about a lot of things." She looked down at her hands, at the engagement ring that suddenly felt like evidence. "Does he want the baby?" Michael asked. "He wants to be involved." "Involved how? Custody? Support? Or is he planning to take you back to Seoul?" "I don't know yet." "You don't know." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't know what he wants. You don't know what you want. But you knew enough to get pregnant." "That's not fair." "Fair?" He finally turned to look at her. "You want to talk about fair? I spent 8 months being patient, respectful, playing by every rule your mother set, and you threw it away for 3 weeks with someone you barely know." "I didn't mean to." "What? Get pregnant? Ruin the arrangement?" His jaw tightened. "My parents are going to ask questions. They're going to want to know why their son's engagement fell apart at the engagement party. I'll tell them it was my fault." "It is your fault." He said it matter-of-factly, without particular heat. "But that doesn't make it easier to explain." She didn't have a response to that. Michael pulled off his seatbelt and turned to face her fully. "I'm going to ask you something." "Okay." "That night I proposed, at the gala, you looked surprised. I was surprised. No, you looked cornered." His voice didn't soften. "I saw it. Just for a second before you smiled and said yes. You looked cornered." Her throat tightened. "I told myself I was reading too much into it, that you were just overwhelmed by the setting, the attention." He held her gaze. "But I wasn't wrong, was I?" She looked at him. This man who had never asked her what she wanted, who had fit perfectly into her mother's plan, who had proposed in front of 200 people so she couldn't say no, even if she'd wanted to. "No," she whispered. "You weren't wrong." He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected all along. "At least you're being honest now." "Michael, don't. Apologize again. It doesn't help." He put his seatbelt back on. "I'll take you home." "What happens now?" "Now?" He started backing out of the driveway. "Now we both call our parents in the morning and do damage control. You figure out what you're doing about Seoul, and I figure out how to explain to my family that the merger isn't happening." The merger? That's what this was, Shania. Let's not pretend otherwise. He turned onto the main road. Your mother's firm, my family's capital. You and me in the middle making it look good. The bluntness of it shouldn't have hurt. She'd known it all along. But hearing him say it out loud made something crack in her chest. I thought, she stopped. You thought what? That I was in love with you? He glanced at her briefly. We both knew what this was. I just thought you'd at least see it through. They drove in silence through empty Atlanta streets. It was past midnight. The engagement party would be winding down. Her mother would be furious. Michael's parents would be planning conversations she didn't want to have. When Michael pulled up to her apartment building, he left the engine running. I assume you'll want to return the ring, he said. She looked down at the diamond on her finger, started to pull it off. Not tonight. He held up a hand. Do it properly. Give it back when you tell your mother. She'll want the theatre of it. You know her well. I know what people like her expect. He stared straight ahead through the windshield. We're not that different, your mother and my parents. Everything's a transaction. Shania got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, unsure what to say. Michael rolled down the window. For what it's worth, I hope Seoul was worth it. He drove away before she could respond. She went upstairs to her apartment, locked the door behind her, and finally let herself fall apart. She made it to the bathroom before the tears came, sat on the cold tile floor with her back against the tub, and cried for the first time since she'd seen that positive pregnancy test 8 weeks ago. Cried for the life she was losing, for the daughter her mother had needed her to be, for Michael, who had been just as trapped as she was and probably knew it, for herself, who had spent 29 years being perfect and had no idea who she actually was underneath all that performance. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother. 2 texts from Michael's mother, asking if she was all right. 1 voicemail from her father she didn't have the energy to listen to. And 1 new message from an unknown number with a Seoul country code. Room 1804, Ritz-Carlton, when you're ready to talk. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she set her phone down, pulled herself up off the bathroom floor, and went to bed, still wearing her engagement dress. Tomorrow she would have to face her mother. Tomorrow she would have to make decisions. Tonight she just needed to survive. Shania woke up to 17 missed calls, 12 from her mother, 3 from Michael's mother, 2 from the senior partner at her firm who'd probably heard something through Atlanta's efficient social circuit. She ignored all of them and made coffee instead. It was barely 7 in the morning. Outside her apartment window, the city was just starting to wake up. Sunday morning traffic was light. Somewhere in this city, her mother was probably already dressed and planning her attack. Michael was probably fielding calls from his parents, and Sunjin, she didn't let herself finish that thought. Her phone rang again. Her mother. Again. Shania let it go to voicemail, then immediately regretted it when the voicemail notification popped up. She knew what it would say without listening. Some version of how could you embarrass me like this mixed with we need to discuss damage control and probably I didn't raise you to be this reckless. She was halfway through her second cup of coffee when someone knocked on her door. For a wild second she thought it might be Sunjin. But when she checked the peephole, it was worse. Her mother stood in the hallway in a cream pantsuit, perfectly composed at 7:30 on a Sunday morning, holding 2 cups from the expensive coffee place downtown that Shania never bothered with. She almost didn't open the door, almost pretended she wasn't home. But Angela Wellington didn't leave. She just stood there, waiting, because she knew her daughter would break first. She always did. Shania's hand shook slightly as she reached for the lock. She opened the door. Good morning. Her mother walked in without waiting for an invitation, set both coffees on the kitchen counter, and took in Shania's appearance with one sweeping glance. You slept in your dress. I was tired. I'm sure you were. Angela sat down on the sofa like she owned it. We need to talk. Mom, Sit down, Shania. She sat, not because she wanted to, but because 29 years of conditioning made it automatic. Her mother was quiet for a moment, hands folded in her lap, posture perfect. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, careful. Michael called me at 6 this morning. Of course he had. Damage control didn't wait for reasonable hours. What did he say? He said the engagement is off. He said it was mutual. He said you both realized you weren't compatible. Angela's eyes were sharp. He was very gracious about it, very diplomatic. That's good. Is it? Her mother's voice didn't rise, but something cold crept into it. Because diplomatic doesn't explain why a stranger walked into your engagement party and demanded a private conversation. It doesn't explain why you left looking like you'd seen a ghost. And it certainly doesn't explain why Michael looked like he wanted to put his fist through a wall when he came back inside. Shania didn't respond. Who was he? Angela asked. A client, from Seoul. Don't lie to me. Her mother's voice went sharp. I've spent 30 years reading people, Shania. That wasn't a client conversation. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Shania's throat tightened. She could feel the familiar pull, the urge to make this easier, to smooth it over, to give her mother the answer that would cause the least disruption. But she was so tired of making things easier. His name is Baek Sunjin. I met him in Seoul 2 months ago. She kept her voice level, clinical. We spent 3 weeks together. I came home. Michael proposed, and then I found out I was pregnant. The silence that followed was absolute. Angela didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there processing information like she was reviewing a contract. Pregnant, she said finally. Yes. With this Sunjin's child. Yes. And Michael knows. As of last night, yes. Her mother stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. When she turned back around, her expression was unreadable. How far along? 8 weeks. And what are you planning to do about it? The question was so clinical, it took Shania a moment to process it. I don't know yet. You don't know? Angela's voice went tight. You're 8 weeks pregnant, and you don't know what you're going to do. I'm still figuring it out. Figuring it out. Her mother crossed her arms. And the father? What does he want? He wants to be involved. Involved how? I don't know yet. We haven't discussed specifics. You haven't discussed specifics. Her mother's voice was dangerously quiet. You're carrying this man's child, but you haven't discussed what that means. It just happened last night, Mom. I haven't had time to... You've had 8 weeks. Angela's control finally cracked. 8 weeks to figure this out. 8 weeks to tell someone. 8 weeks to make a plan. Instead, you let it explode in the middle of your engagement party in front of everyone who matters. I didn't. Plan for him to show up. You didn't plan for anything. That's the problem. Her mother stepped closer. Do you have any idea what this looks like? What people are going to say? I don't care what people say. Well, you should. Angela's voice rose. Because those people are partners at your firm, clients, colleagues, people whose opinions determine whether you make partner or get passed over for someone who didn't humiliate themselves publicly. This isn't about partnership. Everything is about how you're perceived. That's how the world works, Shania. I taught you that. That's how your world works. The words came out before she could stop them. Her mother went very still. Excuse me. Shania's heart was pounding, but she didn't back down. Your world, Mom, where everything is optics and strategy and making sure the right people approve of the right things. I built you a life. You built yourself a legacy. The words were coming faster now, like a dam, breaking. I was never your daughter. I was your project, your proof that you could raise someone better than Dad, someone controlled and perfect and incapable of making messy choices. Don't bring your father into this. Why not? He's the whole reason, isn't he? Shania stood up, her voice shaking. You've spent my entire life making sure I didn't turn out like him, making sure I didn't feel too much or want too much or risk too much, and I went along with it because I thought that's what love looked like. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. Shania picked up the engagement ring from where she'd set it on the coffee table and held it out. This wasn't for me. It was for you. Michael wasn't my choice. He was yours, and I almost went through with it because I was too afraid to disappoint you. Her mother stared at the ring but didn't take it. You're making a mistake, Angela said quietly. Maybe, but it'll be my mistake. You think running off to Seoul with a man you barely know is going to fix this? I didn't say I was going to Seoul. Then what are you going to do? I don't know yet. That's not good enough, Shania. It's going to have to be. Her mother's expression hardened. If you walk away from this, from everything I've built for you, don't expect me to be here when it falls apart. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Angela picked up her purse. You want to make your own choices. Fine, but you do it alone. I'm not cleaning up after you when this disaster implodes. She walked to the door. Mom, Angela stopped, hand on the doorknob. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me. Until then, you're on your own. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Shania stood in her apartment, still holding the engagement ring, and felt something shift in her chest. Not lighter, exactly. Just different. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the Seoul number. I'm here until Tuesday. After that, I go back. With or without an answer. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she opened a new text to her father, the first real conversation they'd had in months. Can we talk? The response came almost immediately. Come by the house, I'll make breakfast. Shania finally changed out of her engagement dress, pulled on jeans and a sweater, and walked out into the Sunday morning sunshine to have a conversation she should have had years ago. Her father's house still had the same blue door she remembered from childhood. Same wooden porch swing. Same faint smell of coffee and old vinyl records drifting through the screen. Shania stood on the porch for a moment before knocking. She hadn't been here in months, hadn't wanted to deal with the guilt her mother laid on thick whenever she mentioned visiting him. He left us, Shania. Don't forget that. But her mother wasn't here now. James Wellington opened the door before she could knock, like he'd been watching for her. He looked older than she remembered. More grey in his beard, more lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same. Hey, baby girl. Hi, Dad. He pulled her into a hug without asking, and she let herself lean into it. When was the last time someone had hugged her without wanting something? Come on in, pancakes are almost ready. The house was smaller than she remembered, cluttered but comfortable. Records stacked against one wall. A saxophone case. Open on the couch. Sheet music scattered across the coffee table like he'd been working on something. It looked lived in, real, nothing like the pristine showroom her mother maintained. Coffee? He asked. Please. He poured her a cup, black, the way she liked it, and went back to flipping pancakes at the stove. They didn't talk for a few minutes, just existed in the same space. And somehow that felt easier than any conversation she'd had in the past 24 hours. Your mother called me this morning, he said finally. Shania's stomach dropped. What did she say? That you'd lost your mind, thrown away your engagement, ruined your life. He glanced back at her. The usual. And what do you think? I think if Angela's that upset, you probably did something right. Despite everything, Shania almost smiled. James set a plate of pancakes in front of her and sat down across the small kitchen table. You want to tell me what happened? You mean Mom didn't give you the full report? I want to hear it from you. So she told him. All of it. Seoul, Sunjin, the pregnancy, Michael, the engagement party, her mother showing up this morning with ultimatums disguised as concern. Her father listened without interrupting, didn't offer advice or judgment, just listened like her words mattered. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. This man from Seoul, he said finally. Sunjin. You care about him? I don't know him well enough to know what I feel. That's not what I asked. Shania looked down at her untouched pancakes. When I was with him, I felt like myself. Not the version Mum wanted. Not the version the firm expected. Just me. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. 3 weeks doesn't mean... 3 weeks is enough to know if someone sees you, her father interrupted gently. The rest is just details. You sound like you're encouraging this. I'm not encouraging or discouraging anything. I'm just saying that being seen, really seen, by another person is rare. And walking away from that because it's complicated or inconvenient or doesn't fit someone else's plan. He trailed off. That's how you end up living someone else's life. The weight of his words settled between them. Is that what happened with you and Mom? Shania asked quietly. James was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the window, looked out at the small backyard where grass grew too long and wildflowers pushed up through the cracks in the patio. Your mother and I loved each other, he said finally. But we wanted different things. She wanted control, certainty, a life she could predict and manage, and I wanted, I don't know, freedom, music, the ability to feel things without apologizing for it. So you left? No, she asked me to leave. He turned to face her. Because I was drowning, and she couldn't save me, and watching me fall apart was destroying both of us. She never told me that. She wouldn't. Because in her version of the story, I'm the villain who chose music over family, and maybe that's easier for her to live with than admitting she loved someone she couldn't fix. Shania felt something crack in her chest. Do you regret it? Leaving? I regret a lot of things. The drinking, the depression I didn't get help for until it was too late, missing years of your life because I was too broken to be the father you deserved. He came back to the table and sat down. But I don't regret refusing to be someone I wasn't, and I don't want you to make that mistake either. What mistake? Becoming your mother's daughter instead of yourself. The words hung in the kitchen like smoke. She thinks I'm throwing my life away, Shania said quietly. She thinks you're throwing away the life she built for you. That's different. Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're 29 years old, Shania. You've spent your whole life being perfect, being careful, doing exactly what you were supposed to do. And where did it get you? Pregnant and alone with my life falling apart? No, it got you to a place where you finally made a choice that was yours. He smiled, but there was something sad in it. The falling apart part. That's just what happens when you stop holding everything together with fear. Took me 20 years to learn that. Hope you're smarter than I was. She wanted to argue, wanted to say it wasn't that simple, but sitting in her father's cluttered kitchen, with pancakes going cold and sun streaming through windows that probably needed washing, she couldn't find the words. What if I don't know what I want? She asked. Then you figure it out, but you do it honestly, not by building another perfect life that makes other people comfortable. Her phone buzzed on the table, a text from an unknown number, not Sunjin this time. This is Beck, Sunjin's assistant. Mr. Beck would like to know if you're available for dinner, tonight. 7 p.m. He'll send a car. Asterisk Shania stared at the message. Her father glanced at it. The soul guy? His assistant? Fancy. It's how he does things, everything scheduled, everything planned. Sounds familiar. Her father raised an eyebrow. You're both good at staying in control. He's nothing like me. Didn't say he was, but you both know what it's like to build walls. He stood and started clearing plates. Difference is, he probably knows why he built his. The observation landed harder than it should have. Shania looked at the message again, then at her father, who was washing dishes like this was a normal Sunday morning, and not the day her entire life was rearranging itself. What would you do? She asked. If you were me? I'd go to dinner. He didn't turn around. And I'd ask him the questions that scare you, the ones you've been avoiding because you're afraid of the answers. Like what? Like whether he wants you, or just the baby. Like whether soul is an escape or a real choice. Like whether you're falling for him or just falling for the idea of being someone different. Her chest tightened. What if I don't like the answers? Then at least you'll know. He dried his hands and turned to face her. But Shania, stop waiting for someone to give you permission to want things. Your mother won't. Michael won't. Even this Sunjin guy won't. You have to give it to yourself. She sat at the table for a long time after he went back to his music in the living room. Then she picked up her phone and typed a response. I'll be ready at 7. The reply came immediately. Mr. Beck will meet you at the restaurant, Matsuri, Buckhead. The reservation is under his name, not his hotel room, a public place, neutral territory. That should have made her feel better. Instead, it made her more nervous, because dinner meant conversation. Conversation meant decisions, and decisions meant she couldn't keep hiding behind uncertainty anymore. Shania stayed at her father's house until early afternoon, then went home to figure out what you wore to dinner with a man you barely knew who somehow saw you better than anyone else ever had. Matsuri was the kind of restaurant where silence felt expensive. Shania arrived 10 minutes early, which meant she spent 10 minutes sitting in the back of the black car Sunjin had sent, watching well-dressed couples disappear through the minimalist entrance, while she tried to remember how to breathe normally. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settled on a simple black dress that felt appropriate without trying too hard, then spent 20 minutes second-guessing that choice. The driver opened her door at exactly 7. Mr. Beck is already inside, Ma'am. Of course he was. Sunjin didn't wait. He arrived early and made everyone else adjust. The hostess recognized his name immediately and led Shania through the restaurant to a private room in the back. Shoji screens, low lighting, a single table set for 2. Sunjin stood when she entered. He'd changed since the engagement party. Dark slacks, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie. He looked less formal, more human. Somehow that made this worse. Shania, he gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? You always have a choice. He waited until she sat before sitting himself. You just don't always believe that. A server appeared, explained the omakase menu in hushed tones, and disappeared as quietly as she'd come. When they were alone again, the silence stretched. How are you feeling? He asked. Pregnant. Possibly about to lose my job. Disowned by my mother as of this morning. She took a sip of water. But other than that, fantastic. Your mother disowned you? Threatened to, close enough. Something flickered across his expression. Because of me. Because of me? You were just the catalyst. The first course arrived. She didn't remember what it was, just pushed it around her plate while Sunjin watched her with that unreadable expression. You're angry, he said. I'm tired. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She sat down, her chopsticks. What do you want, Sunjin? I want to know what you're thinking. About what? About us, the baby, soul. He leaned back slightly. About whether you're going to spend the rest of this dinner avoiding eye contact or if we're going to actually talk. We're talking. No, you're deflecting. There's a difference. She finally looked at him directly. Fine. You want to talk? Let's talk. Why did you really come to Atlanta? I told you. You told me you came because I didn't tell you about the pregnancy, but you could have called, sent lawyers, demanded a paternity test from 8,000 miles away. She held his gaze. Instead, you got on a plane and blew up my engagement party in front of everyone I know. Why? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Because I needed to see your face when you explained why you were going to marry another man while carrying my child. The honesty of it hit harder than she expected. And what did you see? Someone who was terrified, not of me, of herself. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but sitting across from him in this expensive private room, she couldn't find the lie. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. The truth. Just once, Shania. Tell me the truth. About what? About Sol. About why you left without saying goodbye. About whether any of it meant something or if I was just... He stopped, started over. Tell me if I'm wasting my time. The vulnerability in his voice undid something in her chest. It meant something, she said. That's the problem. How is that a problem? Because I don't know you. Because 3 weeks isn't enough time to build a life on. Because moving to Seoul for a man I barely know makes me exactly like my father, and I've spent my whole life trying not to be him. Your father. He fell apart chasing things he wanted. Destroyed his marriage, lost his family. I watched it happen. She looked down at her hands. My mother spent 29 years making sure I didn't make his mistakes. And then I met you, and I threw away every lesson she taught me. Is that what Seoul was? A mistake? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know if it was real, or if it was just me trying to be someone different for a few weeks. Sunjin set down his chopsticks. You want to know what I think? Do I have a choice? I think Seoul was the first time you let yourself want something without asking permission, and that terrified you. So you came home and tried to bury it under the life your mother built for you. You don't know that. Don't I? He leaned forward slightly. You said yes to Michael 3 days after you left my bed. 3 days, Shania. That's not coincidence. That's panic. She didn't respond. And now you're sitting here telling me you don't know if Seoul was real, but you won't look me in the eye when you say it, because you do know. You're just afraid of what it means. Stop. Why? Because I'm right? Because you're making this sound simple when it's not. She finally met his gaze. You live in Seoul. I live here. You run an empire I don't understand. I have a career, a life. Had. His voice went quiet. Hard. Past tense. Your engagement is over. Your mother won't speak to you. Your firm will hear about this by tomorrow. He held her gaze. Your life here is already gone. The question is what you're building next. The bluntness of it landed like a blow. That's not fair. It's accurate. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. I'm not here to be fair. I'm here because you're carrying my child, and I won't let you pretend I don't exist. I'm not pretending. Then what are you doing? He turned to face her. Because from where I'm standing, you're treating this like I'm asking you to give something up when you've already lost it. She stood too because sitting felt impossible. What does that even look like? Marriage? Partnership? Me raising a child in a country where I don't speak the language while you run your business? It looks like whatever we decide it looks like. His voice was still hard, but something shifted in his expression. But it starts with you being honest about what you want. I don't know what I want. Yes, you do. He didn't move closer, just watched her from across the room. You knew in Seoul. You know now. You're just afraid to say it. Stop telling me what I feel. Then tell me yourself. His voice dropped, went quieter, but no less intense. Tell me Seoul meant nothing. Tell me you don't think about those 3 weeks. Tell me you can walk away from this and not wonder what if. She couldn't. God help her, she couldn't. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, she could hear her own heartbeat. This is insane, she whispered. Probably. I barely know you. You know enough. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had crashed her engagement party, who saw through every defense she built, who was standing across a private dining room, offering her a life that made absolutely no sense, and somehow felt more real than anything she'd ever had. He moved closer then, not touching, just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I'm scared, she said finally. Something in his expression softened, just slightly. I know. He reached up slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. But I'm not asking you to stop being scared, he said quietly. I'm asking you to choose anyway. She closed her eyes against the weight of it. When she opened them again, he was still there, still looking at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. I need time, she said. His hand dropped. You have until Tuesday, then I go back. To Seoul. And if I don't decide by then I go back alone, and we figure out custody arrangements like strangers. His jaw tightened. Is that what you want? No. The answer was immediate and terrifying. But standing there in the private room with the city spread out below them and her entire life rearranging itself around this moment, she still couldn't make herself say it. I don't know, she said instead. But I'll have an answer by Tuesday. He nodded once, stepped back, put distance between them again. Then I'll wait. They didn't finish dinner, didn't pretend they could sit across from each other and make small talk after that conversation. Sun-jin paid the check, walked her to the car, opened the door himself instead of letting the driver do it. Shania, she turned. Whatever you decide, he said quietly. Decide for yourself, not for your mother, not for me, for you. Then he closed the door, and she watched him walk back into the restaurant, shoulders straight, every inch of him controlled. The car pulled away and she leaned her head against the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Tuesday. 2 days to decide the rest of her life. She'd never felt more awake or more terrified in her entire existence. Shania spent Monday morning at her father's house, sitting on his back porch while he practiced scales on his saxophone inside. She tried going home, tried sleeping, tried doing anything other than thinking about Tuesday and Seoul and the choice she still didn't know how to make. Nothing worked. So she'd shown up at her father's door at 8 in the morning, and he'd let her in without questions, made coffee, and left her alone with her thoughts while he worked through his music. The repetitive scales were oddly soothing. Same notes, over and over, building muscle memory through repetition. She wished decisions worked like that. Repeat the same question enough times, and eventually the answer would become automatic. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. My mother wants the ring back. I told her you'd drop it off this week. No rush. She stared at the message, typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them, finally settled on, I'll bring it by tomorrow. His response was immediate. Thanks. And Shania, I hope you figure out what you want. She set the phone down and pressed her hands against her face. Everyone kept telling her to figure out what she wanted, like it was simple, like wanting something made it the right choice. The saxophone stopped. Her father came out onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee and sat down in the chair next to her. You've been staring at that same spot in the yard for 20 minutes, he said. Just thinking. About Seoul? About everything. He took a sip of coffee and waited. That was the thing about her father. He never pushed, just created space and let her fill it when she was ready. What if I go and it doesn't work? She asked finally. Then you come back. And if I stay, and I spend the rest of my life wondering what if? Then you live with that. He looked at her. There's no safe choice here, baby girl. Both options are risks. You just have to decide which risk you can live with. That's not helpful. It's not supposed to be helpful. It's supposed to be honest. He set down his coffee. You want me to tell you what to do? Yes. Too bad. This one's yours. She almost smiled despite everything. They sat in silence for a while. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing their lawn, even though it was barely spring. Can I ask you something? Shania said. Always. Do you regret it, choosing music over stability, over Mom? Her father was quiet for a long moment. I didn't choose music over your mother. I chose being honest about who I was over pretending to be someone I wasn't. He looked at her. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, because one is selfish, the other is just human. He picked up his coffee again. Your mother wanted me to be someone I couldn't be, someone controlled and predictable. And I tried. God knows I tried. But eventually, trying to be someone else breaks you more than being yourself ever could. Even if being yourself hurts people? Even then. Because the alternative is living a lie, and that hurts everyone eventually. He reached over and squeezed her hand. You're not choosing between Seoul and Atlanta, Shania. You're choosing between the life someone else built for you and the life you might build for yourself. That's scarier, but it's also the only choice that matters. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. This is Angela Wellington's assistant. Mrs. Wellington would like to schedule a meeting with you this week to discuss next steps. Please confirm your availability. Shania showed the message to her father. He read it and shook his head. Even when she's disowning you, she's scheduling meetings about it. Should I respond? Do you want to? I don't know. Then don't. Not until you do. He stood up. I'm going to make lunch. You staying? If that's okay. You're always okay here, baby girl, you know that. He went inside, leaving her alone with her phone and her thoughts and the sound of wind chimes from the neighbor's porch. She looked at her mother's message, then at Michael's, then at the last text from Sunjin's assistant about dinner. 3 different versions of her life, all waiting for an answer she still didn't have. Her hand moved to her stomach, still flat. No visible sign of the choice that had started all of this. What do you think? She whispered to the baby that was barely more than a possibility. Seoul or Atlanta? Sunjin or safety? Obviously the baby didn't answer, but sitting there on her father's porch with her hand on her stomach and the future spreading out in front of her like an unmarked road, something shifted. Not certainty, not suddenly knowing the right answer, just clarity. She'd spent 29 years making choices based on what other people wanted, what her mother expected, what looked good on paper, what minimized risk and maximized approval. And where had it gotten her? Sitting alone on a porch, pregnant and engaged to no one, with a mother who loved control more than she loved her daughter, and a life that had never actually been hers. Maybe her father was right. Maybe there was no safe choice. Maybe the only real question was which risk she could live with. She picked up her phone and opened a new message, stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she started typing, not to her mother, not to Michael, not even to Sunjin, to herself. A note in her phone, a list, not of pros and cons or logical arguments, just truths she'd been avoiding. Things I know. 1. I felt more like myself in 3 weeks with Sunjin than in 8 months with Michael. 2. Seoul scared me because I wanted it too much. 3. I said yes to Michael because saying no to my mother felt impossible. 4. I'm tired of living my life in past tense. Things I should have done, should have said, should have chosen. 5. I don't know if Seoul will work, but I know Atlanta doesn't. She read the list twice. Then she saved it and set her phone down. Her father came back out with sandwiches and found her crying. Hey! He sat down next to her. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She wiped her face. I think I know what I want. Yeah? Yeah. You want to tell me? She looked at him. This man who had chosen honesty over safety, who had lost everything and rebuilt something smaller but real, who was offering her space to make her own mistakes instead of living his or her mother's. Not yet, she said. But soon. He nodded and handed her a sandwich. Fair enough. They ate in comfortable silence while the afternoon stretched toward evening, and Shania's phone stayed blessedly quiet. By 8 that night, Shania was back in her apartment, staring at her phone. She'd typed the message 3 times, deleted it twice. The 3rd time, she hit send before she could second guess. Herself. Can we talk? Tonight. I don't want to wait until Tuesday. The response came within 30 seconds. Room 1804. I'll be here. She changed clothes twice, settled on jeans and a sweater, then stood in front of her mirror trying to recognize the woman staring back at her. 29 years old, pregnant, about to walk into a hotel room and change her entire life. Her hands were shaking when she locked her apartment door. They were still shaking when she knocked on room 1804. Sunjin opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting right there. He was in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, barefoot. He looked tired, human. "Come in." She walked past him into the suite. It looked lived in now, laptop open on the desk, coffee cup on the table, his jacket thrown over the back of a chair. Evidence that he'd been here for days, waiting. "Do you want—" "I'm going to Seoul." The words came out in a rush before she lost her nerve. "With you, if the offer still stands." He went very still. "Say that again." "I'm choosing Seoul. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing—" Her voice cracked. "I'm choosing myself, finally." For a long moment, he didn't move, just stood there looking at her like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Not a kiss, just his arms around her, tight enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her chest, fast and hard despite his controlled exterior. "You're sure?" he said against her hair, not a question, a confirmation. "I'm terrified, but yes, I'm sure." He pulled back enough to look at her face. His hands came up to frame her jaw, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Tell me why. Why? I need to hear you say it. All of it." She took a shaky breath. "Because I spent 3 weeks with you and felt more real than I've felt in 29 years. Because you see me, not the version my mother built or the version that looks good on paper. Just me." Her voice steadied. "Because I'm tired of being afraid of wanting things. And I want this. I want you. I want to find out what we could be if I stopped running from it." Something in his expression cracked. Relief, possession. Something that looked almost like fear. "I'm not easy to be with," he said quietly. "My work is complicated. My family is—" He stopped. "There are things about my life in Seoul that you don't know yet. Then I'll learn them. I travel. I'm gone sometimes for weeks. Then I'll come with you. Or I won't. We'll figure it out. I'm not good at letting people in. Neither am I. So we'll be terrible at it together." He almost smiled. Almost. "Your mother will never forgive you for this." "I know." It hurt less than she expected. "But I'm done living for her approval. You'll be 8,000 miles from everything you know. I'll be with you. That's something." His hands tightened on her face. "Shania." "Yeah?" "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it." Her heart was pounding. "Okay. I don't know how to do this. The relationship part. The being someone's—" He stopped, started over. "I'm going to mess this up, probably more than once." "Okay. But I want you, not just the baby. You." His voice dropped. "I've wanted you since that first night in Seoul, and I haven't stopped. I don't think I can stop." The honesty of it broke something open in her chest. "Good," she whispered, "because I don't want you to." This time when he kissed her, it felt different than Seoul. Not urgent or desperate, just certain, like they'd both finally stopped running. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "When?" he asked. "When what?" "When do we leave?" "I don't know. I have to—" She stopped, laughed a little. "I don't actually know what I have to do. Give notice at work, maybe. Pack. Tell my father." "Your father knows?" "Not officially. But yeah, he knows. And he's okay with this. He told me to stop waiting for permission to want things." She pulled back to look at Sunjin. "So I'm not waiting anymore." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he stepped back, pulled his phone from his pocket, and made a call. "Minho, I need you to change my flight." A pause. "No, not just me. 2 tickets, first class." Another pause. "Thursday, that gives her 2 days." He looked at Shania. "Is that enough time?" Her entire life was rearranging itself in real time. 2 days to leave everything she'd ever known. Yes, she said. That's enough. He finished the call and set his phone down. Thursday morning, we leave from Hartsfield at 9. Okay. You'll stay with me, in Seoul, until you find a place, or... He stopped. Or you don't find a place. You just stay. It should have felt too fast, too much. Instead, it felt inevitable. Okay, she said again. He moved closer. You can change your mind. I know. Right up until we board that plane. If you want to walk away, I won't. But if you do... She reached up and put her hand over his mouth. Sunjin, stop. He kissed her palm, then pulled her hand away. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. Once we do this, once you get on that plane, I'm not letting you go easily. I'm not good at letting go of things that matter to me. Is that supposed to scare me? It's supposed to be honest. She looked at him, this man who had crashed her engagement party, who had pushed and demanded and refused to let her hide from herself, who was standing in a hotel room offering her a future that terrified her and felt more right than anything ever had. Good, she said, because I'm not good at letting go either, so I guess we're even. His smile was small, real. Come here. She did, and this time when he kissed her, it felt like a promise neither of them knew how to make but were making anyway. They stayed up talking until 3 in the morning. About Seoul, about logistics, about what her life there might look like, the expat community, law firms that hired international associates, Korean language classes, the apartment he owned in Gangnam that had sat empty for 2 years, about the baby, what kind of parents they might be, what they'd name it, whether they'd get married or just figure it out as they went. They didn't have answers to most of it. But sitting in his hotel suite with the city lights dimming outside and the future spreading out uncertain and terrifying and real, Shania realized she didn't need answers. She just needed to stop being afraid of the questions. When she finally left to go home and pack, Sunjin walked her to the elevator. Thursday, he said. Thursday, she agreed. Don't disappear on me again. I won't. He kissed her once more, then let her go. In the elevator, alone, Shania pulled out her phone and looked at the list she'd made that afternoon. Then she added one more line. 6. I don't know what happens next, but for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. She went home, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing for Seoul. Outside her window, Atlanta glittered in the darkness. In 2 days, it would be 8,000 miles away, and somehow, that felt exactly right. And it's a wrap. Thanks for listening, fam. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments.